In 1959, on a frozen mountain in Siberia, 9 experienced hikers vanished into a winter nightmare that would haunt the world for over 6 decades. Their tent was found slashed from the inside. Their bodies scattered across the mountainside, bearing injuries so severe they defied explanation. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident, a mystery that has spawned over 75 theories, government cover-ups, and questions that still echo through the halls of Russian investigators today. What could terrify 9 seasoned explorers so completely that they would flee barefoot into a blizzard, choosing certain death over whatever waited inside their tent? January 25, 1959. The Cold War was at its peak, and the Soviet Union guarded its secrets fiercely. But for Igor Dyatlov, a 23-year-old radio engineering student, the only mission that mattered was conquering the northern Ural Mountains. Dyatlov assembled a team of his most trusted companions, fellow students and experienced hikers who shared his passion for adventure. Their goal wasn't just recreation, they were pursuing Grade 3 accreditation, the highest honor for Soviet hikers, requiring a grueling 300-kilometer trek across some of the most unforgiving terrain on Earth. These weren't reckless amateurs. Each member held Grade 2 hiking certificates. They were young, skilled, and absolutely convinced of their abilities. Among them were Zina Kolmogorova, whose diary would later provide haunting glimpses into their final days, and Yuri Doroshenko, whose burned hands would become one of the expedition's most puzzling clues. On January 28, just days into their journey, Yuri Yudin fell ill and was forced to turn back. As he watched his friends disappear into the white wilderness, he had no idea he was seeing them alive for the last time. That decision to return home would save his life, and burden him with survivor's guilt for the rest of his days. By February 1, the group had reached the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, a name that translates to Dead Mountain in the local Monsi language. Perhaps they should have heeded the warning in its name. A severe snowstorm had forced them off their planned route. Exhausted and battling temperatures that plummeted to -40 degrees Fahrenheit, they made a decision that sealed their fate. They would camp on the mountain's exposed slopes rather than seek shelter in the forest below. Their final diary entries paint a picture of confident adventurers, still joking despite the harsh conditions. Zina wrote about the beautiful sunset. Igor documented their progress with methodical precision. None of them suspected that within hours, something would drive them from their tent in such terror that they would rather face the killing cold outside than remain one moment longer inside. What happened next would puzzle investigators for generations. When the group failed to return as scheduled, search parties mobilized. On February 26, nearly a month after the incident, rescuers made a discovery that chilled them to the bone. The tent stood partially collapsed on the mountainside, covered in snow. But it wasn't the weather that had destroyed it. The canvas bore long, deliberate cuts, sliced from the inside, as if the occupants had desperately fought their way out. All their belongings remained inside: warm clothes, boots, food, everything they needed to survive. The scene defied logic. Why would experienced hikers abandon their only shelter and their survival gear to venture into a deadly blizzard wearing nothing but underwear and thin clothing? Following a trail of footprints in the snow, searchers found the first 2 bodies 300 meters away, near the remnants of a small fire. Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko lay frozen in their underwear. Doroshenko's hands were severely burned, and Krivonishenko had bitten his own knuckles so hard that flesh was found in his mouth. 3 more bodies were discovered between the fire and the tent: Igor Dyatlov, Zina Kolmogorova, and Rustam Slobodin. Their positions suggested they had been trying to return to camp when hypothermia claimed them. But 4 hikers remained missing. It wasn't until May, after the snow melted, that the final 4 bodies were discovered in a ravine 75 meters from the fire site. What the autopsy revealed would transform this mysterious tragedy into something that seemed to defy the laws of physics. Nikolai Thibeaux-Brignoles had suffered a massive skull fracture. Lyudmila Dubinina and Alexander Zolotaryov had sustained chest injuries so severe they were compared to those from high-speed car crashes, yet there were no external wounds. The force required to cause such internal damage was equivalent to that of an explosion or a multi-ton impact. Most disturbing of all, Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, lips, and part of her facial tissue. Zolotaryov and Alexander Kolevatov were missing their eyebrows and eyes. The official Soviet investigation concluded that 6 had died from hypothermia and 3 from fatal injuries. But they offered no explanation for what could have caused such devastating trauma in the middle of nowhere, with no signs of a struggle and no evidence of outside involvement. The case was hastily closed, the files classified, and a shroud of secrecy descended over Dead Mountain that would last for decades. In the information vacuum that followed, theories multiplied like wildfire. Some pointed to the area's military significance, secret weapons testing, parachute mines, or failed missile launches. The discovery of radioactive contamination on some clothing only fueled these suspicions. Others suggested attacks by the indigenous Monsi people, though local authorities quickly dismissed this. The Monsi were peaceful, and there was no evidence of conflict. Wildlife attacks were considered and ruled out, no animal tracks were found, and the injuries didn't match any known predator. More exotic theories emerged: Yeti attacks, UFO encounters, and even suggestions of infrasound, mysterious low-frequency sound waves that could induce panic and disorientation. Witnesses reported strange orange lights in the sky near the time of the incident, adding fuel to extraterrestrial speculation. For 30 years, the Soviet government's silence only deepened the mystery. When Glasnost finally allowed discussion of previously forbidden topics, the case exploded into popular consciousness. Books, documentaries, and investigations multiplied, each proposing new explanations for the inexplicable. But perhaps the most compelling theory would come from an unexpected source: the very forces of nature the hikers thought they understood. In 2019, Russian authorities officially reopened the case under immense public pressure. After reviewing thousands of pages of evidence and conducting new field investigations, they reached a startling conclusion: a rare type of avalanche called a slab avalanche had killed the Dyatlov group. This wasn't the typical avalanche most people imagine. Swiss researchers Johann Gorm and Alexander Puzrin used advanced computer modeling to show how a delayed slab avalanche could have struck the tent hours after the hikers fell asleep. A layer of compressed snow, destabilized by the tent's placement and strong katabatic winds, suddenly collapsed onto the sleeping hikers. The impact would have caused severe internal injuries to those directly underneath while leaving others relatively unharmed but panicked. Disoriented and possibly injured, the group cut their way out of the tent and fled down the mountain, planning to wait out the danger before returning for their gear. But in the disorienting darkness and brutal cold, their temporary retreat became a death sentence. This theory explains the tent's condition, the severe injuries, and the group's seemingly irrational behavior. It even accounts for the missing soft tissues. Months of exposure to the elements and scavenging animals would have caused such damage. Yet for many researchers and family members, questions remain. Teodora Hadziuska, founder of Dyatlov and one of the world's leading experts on the case, has spent decades analyzing every piece of evidence. She's translated thousands of pages of Russian documents, interviewed witnesses, and created the most comprehensive database of case materials in existence. Hadziuska believes the avalanche theory, while scientifically sound, doesn't account for all the evidence. The precise nature of some injuries, the radioactive contamination, and inconsistencies in witness testimonies continue to trouble researchers. Other experts remain convinced that human intervention played a role. They point to the Soviet Union's culture of secrecy, the area's military significance, and the rushed closure of the original investigation as evidence of a cover-up. Keith McCloskey, another prominent Dyatlov researcher, has identified discrepancies in the official timeline and location data that suggest the true story may be more complex than any single theory suggests. Recent expeditions to the pass have yielded new insights but also new questions. The discovery of additional slab avalanche evidence supports the natural disaster theory, yet other findings continue to fuel alternative explanations. Today, more than 6 decades later, the Dyatlov Pass incident remains one of history's most compelling unsolved mysteries. But perhaps that's exactly why it matters so much. 9 young people set out to challenge themselves against nature's fury. They were dreamers, adventurers, students with their whole lives ahead of them. Igor Dyatlov was planning to marry his girlfriend after the expedition. Zina Kolmogorova was studying to become an engineer. Yuri Doroshenko was passionate about radio technology and exploration. Their story reminds us that mystery still exists in our mapped and measured world. That despite all our technology and understanding, nature can still surprise us. That some questions may never have neat, clean answers, and maybe that's exactly what makes us human, our refusal to stop asking them. The families of the Dyatlov group waited decades for answers. Some, like Yuri Yudin, the survivor who turned back, spent their entire lives haunted by what they couldn't prevent or explain. Yudin passed away in 2013, carrying his questions with him to the grave. But their legacy lives on in every researcher who refuses to accept mystery as a final answer. In every scientist who builds better models to understand avalanche behavior. In every investigator who demands transparency from their government. In every adventurer who respects the mountain's power while refusing to stop exploring. The truth about Dyatlov Pass may lie in cutting-edge avalanche science, or it may still be waiting to be discovered. But the real power of their story isn't in solving the mystery, it's in reminding us that some questions are worth spending a lifetime trying to answer. What do you think happened on Dead Mountain? Share your theories in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more deep dives into history's greatest mysteries. Because somewhere out there, the next great mystery is waiting to be uncovered, and it might just be you who finds the key to unlock it. The hikers of the Dyatlov Pass expedition deserve to be remembered not just as victims of an unsolved mystery, but as brave explorers who dared to push beyond the known world. Their story is far from over.